Yes, it is another one. Now, I know I just did this video and I'm going to delete that one because this deserves so much more. And in case this is a group I belong to, the Korean Western Corridor Vets. So any veterans that have served in Korea, of whom I have spent many years, and matter of fact, I've even retired here in Korea with my wife. But even my family has a history of Korea. My grandfather, for example, fought in World War II, Korea and Vietnam. So he saw some upfront and personal things in regards to the Korean War, and I am just amazed at the amount of ignorance by one person. Again, social media does not disappoint, and it happened on this Korean Western Corridor vet page. So we're going to go over this, and we're going to go over some very important information because we need to educate the ignorant. Now, I'm not saying ignorant as being an offensive term. I'm saying it as just a point of order, a fact that everybody is ignorant to some degree or another in certain circumstances. However, to be so blatantly ignorant and then insult people because, well, you'll see. We'll get into this. So anyway, on this page, what we end up seeing is that this person down here that you can see, and we'll kind of blow this up, Carmen D says, I'm being told that Camp Casey is closed and they are moving the second division out of Tongducheon. Anybody know what is going on? Well, this is really interesting because spending a lot of time in Korea, as I have, and doing papers and things like that as a senior non-commissioned officer who's worked in S3 operations and, yeah, just kind of, being stationed in Korea. And then, taking college classes and history classes in high school and so on and so forth. Apparently, there's a huge divide in what they teach now versus what I was taught. And there's even a divide between what I was taught and my parents and especially my grandparents. So this person, Carmen, ends up saying, hey, this is the thing, and I want to know about TDC, Camp Casey, is it closing down? And then somebody ended up saying here, as you can see, time to leave Korea. The ROC are more than capable, defend themselves. To which Carmen says, they always were. I find this hard to believe. So we're going to take a look at this and in more detail. So with that being said, let's take a look at, as soon as we get to this page here, and we'll go into greater detail. So what we end up seeing here is that Carmen ends up saying they always were. So in other words, Korea was always able to defend themselves. And, before, during, after the Korean War, they always were? No, they weren't, honey. I'm sorry. And to which I replied, no, another person who doesn't know history, with the facepalm thing, because that's clearly what it is. And Carmen ends up talking, she ends up with this here. I mean, with this response, shut up. I think mature and civil adults would kind of give proof or offer some facts as to why she has this viewpoint based in reality and not the multiverse of Marvel that is going down the tubes. So she said, shut up. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Especially with somebody who has been in Korea for a number of years, who lives in Korea, whose grandfather fought in the Korean War, seen pictures of the war and the after effects of the war, and again, even doing papers and studies on it. Instead of responding with facts and being civil, you immediately resort to insults. Very classy, Carmen. And here is her response. She says, you make stupid remark and you are so wrong and dumb that you believe I'm going to debate you. Shut up. And that's kind of the tone that I hear in her voice that comes across. I could be totally wrong. It could be, an English accent, American accent. It doesn't really matter the accent. But it just, a stupid remark of saying, no, that's not reality, and history shows otherwise, basically. And she says, you believe I'm going to debate you. Well, it doesn't matter whether you want to debate or not. You obviously don't have anything to debate with, so thus you resort to shut up and insults. So what I ended up doing is going through and leaving a remark. And this is very important because facts matter. And for a long period of time, South Korea could not defend itself against the DPRK. Now, in hindsight, I should have kind of explained that DPRK is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is North Korea. But oh well, lesson learned. The backing by China made it very one-sided outcome. North Korea had more resources than the South, and their military was advanced for the time. South was in rebel for many years after the war, which my grandfather fought in. This doesn't even consider the political allies the North Korean had with China and other communist nations, whereas South Korea had little to none. You see, and we're going to go into even more detail now because I really want to explain the situation. Now, if you look at the history of Korea, which most people don't know of, and again, that's ignorance, but that's okay because I was ignorant on this as well. So when I got educated on this, I found out that Korea had been under colonial rule. It really didn't have a standing military like other nations because of the Confucianism that was part of the culture of Korea. They did have, and then it was overrun by Japan, and they were forbidden against having a military. And so really, when it got to the point after World War II, Korea wasn't in a good place economically, militarily, pretty much all the way around. It was a pretty rough place compared to other countries. Like the United States was the biggest country, and in regards to military might and so on and so forth, especially after World War II, after we built up and all that. So anyway, it ends up when South Korea got into the conflict of the Korean War that went from 1950 to 1953 and ended with the armistice, which is basically a ceasefire. It ends up Korea had maybe 100, maybe 120,000 military personnel. And oh, by the way, they lost the majority of those. And there was a lot of other damage that occurred from the Korean War that obviously this person, Carmen, has no clue about. So even after the armistice was signed in 27 July 53, it was designed to ensure a complete cessation of hostilities and all acts of armed force in Korea until a final peaceful settlement is achieved. The problem is North Korea never wanted any part of any settlement because they are a communist dictatorship, and it's just been bad ever since. South Korea needed the United States to deter the North from attacking the South for many years. And we're going to go into some more facts on that, which I went to here. Here are some interesting facts about South Korea after the war. Destruction ratios of major industries during the first 4 months of the war were estimated to be as high as 70% of the textile industry, 70% of the chemical industry, 40% of the agricultural machining industry, and 10% of the rubber. In addition, Korea Transportation Ministry statistics revealed that about 600,000 housing units, 46.9% of railroad, a bunch of roads totaling 500 kilometers, and 1,453 bridges totaling 49 kilometers were destroyed during the war. Furthermore, by August of 51, 44% of factory buildings and 42% of production facilities lay in ruins. So among all the damages, there was mining industry, which is the worst. 51% of the industry was destroyed, and estimated damage as high as $549 million, accounting for 23.3% of all industrial damage. Damage of power plants was even more devastating, with nearly 80% destroyed. So we're talking about power, we're talking about electricity, we're talking about all of those things that we take for granted of just flipping a switch and having lights and heat and the whole 9 yards. 80% was destroyed. Yeah. Within 2 months since the start of the war, power production plummeted down to a miserable rate of 11,000 kilowatts an hour, about 1/8 of the 1948 production level of 80,000, which was the equivalent of 1/10 of the power consumption in 1945. The massive destruction of electric facilities brought about a drastic cutback on productive activities. When you don't have electricity, it's hard to make things. Just saying, it's hard to run hospitals, it's hard to put the lights on, it's hard to run machinery to make food and feed the populace. The total war damage was estimated as 41.23 billion won, which is the equivalent of 6.9 billion back then in 1953. So if you do the math and figure what that cost would be today in our time, yeah, it is mind-boggling. The exchange rate, it was the equivalent to 86% of the 1953 gross national product, and you can read some other stuff there. Consequently, the foreign trade deteriorated from U.S. $208 million in 1948 to 2.9 million in 1950, and then it went down after that. Even rice crops fell down to a 65% level of average annual production of the 1945 to 1950 period. All these factors led to serious inflation. And with that, during the military, during the war, a lot of the Korean military died because of that, because of the war. So now you don't have an infrastructure, you don't have electricity, you don't have textiles, you don't have food production, you don't have electricity. My wife remembers growing up with dirt floors. I mean, the majority of Korea, if you do any modicum of research about Korea during and after the war, even before the war, you will see that it was a pretty poor country. So anyway, we're going to go back up to here, and it ends up the reason South Korea did not, the reason being South Korea did not, that the required infrastructure, military personnel, technology, or economic backing to defend themselves. Because basically they were decimated. It wasn't a war of, okay, we're just going to fight and people died, but we're going to leave all your infrastructure. We're going to leave the electric, the production, the industries, the housing, and so on and so forth. We're just going to fight on the modern day battlefield and duke it out, and everything else is going to be fine. That's not how it worked out. They basically razzed South Korea and just decimated it. The war also caused 1.2 million deaths and more than 80% decline of the gross domestic product. It ends up that South Korean military casualties amounted to 137,000 plus soldiers, 450,000 plus were injured, almost 25,000 were missing, and over 8,300 were captured. Civilian casualties were approximately 1 million, about 990,000. So with a decimated infrastructure, no military, no nothing, South Korea had to rebuild from the ground up. And even worse, in light of the tragedy that it had experienced, it wasn't just starting over, it was starting over. And the trauma that the Korean people felt was just, it was mind-boggling. It is just so terrible. So, however, South Korea now has all of these things in place. So with that being said, to say that, they always were, up here that we end up saying, they were always able to defend themselves, and that they were always able to, they didn't need the U.S. at all, is making that implication, is rooted in ignorance and backed up by stupidity. Because here we see somebody who is making a claim, who is obviously, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that she is a military service member, and or her husband is a military service member, because she came on this page. She's a participant on this private page. And let's take a look at this. Let's see what she looks like. Let's view her profile and see what we got here. Fort Bragg. So obviously it ends up that she is of, let's see if we can get this in here. Obviously she is, as a service member who is in Fort Bragg, or she's been stationed there or has an affinity for Fort Bragg. And let's see the about. Of course, nothing's mentioned. But, we see some information here, and I bet you, here's some photos. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's one of these two people. So I'm going to say it's the younger one here. I think that's celebrating birthdays. I'm going to say it's the younger one. So for Carmen, I'm really disappointed in the fact that Carmen made such a statement that Korea they always were, again, answering the question, they were always able to defend themselves against North Korea is absolutely and unequivocally untrue. Where was she in school? What was she taught in school? And did she pay attention in school? Because if she was taught about the Korean War, from what I remember of being taught in school, was very vivid, and it left an impression upon me of showing the importance of how much the United States needed to help out Korea. But the problem was, even at that time, the United States couldn't help out as much, so that's why the United Nations came into play and helped and funneled money, goods, services, and again, in helping the rebuilding of the effort of South Korea. While being an ally, the largest military force and most advanced military force in the world was basically helping out the one that was being bullied, stopped the bully and said, hey, if you mess with my friend, we're going to have issues and you're not going to like it. So that armistice and that agreement, which South Korea agreed to, and even still agrees to this day, of having the United States forces here in Korea, has been a huge deterrent. And during the time that North Korea has been deterred from attacking the South again, has resulted in Korea being able to build itself up into a major powerhouse in regards to economic, military advancements, medical, the whole nine yards. It has succeeded wildly more than a lot of people could even imagine or dream. Now, what do I think about the United States military being in Korea? Do I think that South Korea can defend itself against North Korea right now? Yeah, I absolutely do. Matter of fact, it ends up because of their infrastructure that they have now, that they're able to do that. And if you look at the comparisons of North Korea with South Korea and what South Korea has now in regards to funding their military, the percentage of their GDP that goes towards military and the advancements in technology compared to North Korea, yes, I absolutely believe that North Korea or South Korea could defend itself against North Korea right now. You look at the military of North Korea, and basically it's just numbers and mass. It's kind of like what they did in the first Korean War. Let's just throw a ton of people into the meat grinder of war, and hopefully we'll overrun it, and who cares how many people died. But the problem is now South Korea has some of the most advanced military technology to defend themselves and protect their people and their way of life compared to North Korea. North Korea still has MiGs, 1950 MiGs that are still in service. They have trucks that are from the 50s that are used in their military. The advancements that they have, and yes, they have some long-range missiles in their launch and stuff, and they have made some advancements in that regard. But for the majority of their military is lacking far behind of what we see when compared to South Korea. So yeah, it all comes down to what you know in history, and the more you know, it is really important because it comes down to the place of where let me throw this up here because I think that's kind of cute. If it pops up, does it pop up? Bam! The more you know, and that's what it's all about. So, yeah. And as for Carmen, the thing is that the younger generation seems to not study history, and if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And if you don't know your history and the facts of what actually happened, because facts do matter, then you start making quite the extreme and unrealistic statements of, oh, South Korea always was able to defend itself against the North. History, all of history, disagrees with you, except for North Korean history, because they make it as if the United States picked a fight when North Korea actually invaded. But other than that one exception, all history shows that South Korea really needed even before the Korean War, they didn't have a military to speak of because of, the Japanese colonization, the forbidding of firearms, and hell, Koreans couldn't even speak their own language at a time when Japan had occupied Korea. So even after that colonialization of Japan during that time, and after that, they didn't have a big military. So really, if the United States did not step in, and if there wasn't help from other countries around the world, free countries, South Korea would have been taken over 100%, because they didn't have a military to speak of. It was only after the war started that they started conscripting people, and basically a draft of saying, okay, let's go fight North Korea. And what ended up happening is similar to what we saw in the United States when the United States civilians got drafted into war. We had dismal results because of the minimal training that those people had. But they did the best with what they had, and with the help of the United States and other countries, South Korea was able to keep North Korea from taking over the peninsula. So, again, it's all about the more you know. And the more you know, then the less ignorant and stupid things that you say come to light on social media. So, yeah, I wanted to redo this video because the first one, it was kind of emotional in my response, and I didn't have a lot of information. I had a lot of information up here, but it just didn't get into my comments. And the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, this deserves a more polished response. So, Carmen, if you're out there and you watch this video, just know that everybody is ignorant. I am ignorant on a huge amount of things. It just means that I don't know. And I think that's what happened to you, is you just don't know the history of Korea, either before the war, during the war, or after the war. And you made a statement based off of feelings instead of facts. And we all do that from time to time. So anyway, yeah, I hope this has been educational. I hope you take a look and you read studies, you go over history and see what Korea was like before, during, and after. The damage that was done, like I showed in this video, so that you don't make ignorant comments, and that way you don't look foolish and stupid when you respond to facts with "shut up, you're dumb and stupid," because that doesn't fly real well. So, with that being said, this is some hard 2x4 tough love, but there comes a time of where if you immediately resort to insults, and then their facts are presented, and then it's just more insults, and it's like, yeah, that's not how civil discourse is supposed to go. So hopefully this is a learning lesson, and the more you know will make you a more educated, mature, and adult individual. So with that being said, everybody else, thanks for watching. Put what you think in regards to what happened during the Korean War. Maybe you have some special insight. Yeah, love to hear it. And especially as I'm retired here, I have more time to study than the average person. So, yeah, take that into account, But still, to make such statements in light of all the reality, we really need to check ourselves. Our statements should be based on facts and not feeling, though you can be passionate and feeling about facts and have vigor and have, be motivated and energetic and standing up for a cause. Those feelings should back up facts, not facts throw those away because I feel. Okay, so anyway, that's it. We'll see you on the next video. Peace. Yeah, there you have it.